Hello everyone, my name is Nelson and I'm gonna talk about 5 things that I have learned about assessment and how to implement them in our classroom. So the agenda for today is I will talk about the distinction between formative and summative assessment. I'll talk about grading. I'll talk about grading and participation slash behavior slash disposition of the student. And then we'll talk about feedback, and our last point will be the idea of flipping the classroom. So let's start with formative versus summative assessments. I'll say what the difference is in a second in terms of how it looks like in our classrooms right now. Some of you are great at this, you understand the difference, and you have both formative and summative assessments, and they are great. And then some of you use only summative assessments or just formative assessments. When it comes to what we should do, based on what I have learned and the information that I've read, I would suggest that we use both formative and summative assessments. They're both important, and they both serve a purpose. So the main idea is that formative assessment happens before, during, and after the course of instruction. For instance, if there is a journal entry, if you assign a journal entry and the student is writing, she can receive feedback before and during and after she's done with the journal entry. And so it's a process. This is where learning happens. It involves a process of learning, and its main goal is the collection of students' data. More specifically, students. It's the collection of data about the students' performance in relation to the learning goals that we have set for our lesson plans. And so we use formative assessments to identify areas of improvement, or to see how the students are doing in terms of the learning goals that we have. And so this is why it's also very important that we have clear learning goals for our lesson plans. If we don't have that, we also don't have accurate, reliable information that we can use to assess the student, to see how the student is doing in our class. On the other hand, when it comes to summative assessments only happen after instruction. So for instance, if I give a lesson, I can then give a test to the students on the lesson to evaluate the level of learning of the students. And so it evaluates the product at the end of the process. It's not the process itself. It's how we evaluate the level of learning that the student has after the instruction. And this is why standardized testing is one of the most common ways of one of the most common forms of summative assessment, because typically what makes sense for most of us is I give a lesson, I should then give a test. However, you could also use other types of assessments, other forms of assessments to and use them as summative assessments. For instance, you could use a project, you could use a portfolio, and so on, to assess the level of learning of your students. And again, in terms of how it looks like in our classrooms, many of us have used somewhere in between 30 to 40 formative assessments in class. And then there's fewer summative assessments, and this makes sense. This is actually what it should look like. Since the summative assessment only happens at the end of instruction, at the end of the unit that we teach, the lesson that we teach. However, one thing that I would say about these two formative and summative assessments is that, again, if you're only using summative assessments, you should also keep track of your formative assessment, have some type of formative assessment, because the implication is if you are only using summative assessments, the summative assessment is not for the students to learn. The learning occurs when you assign formative assessments, and so the implication is if you're only having the students do summative assessments at the end of each lesson or unit that you teach, or at the end of the year, there isn't really any process of learning. They're not getting engaged in assessment. And so another implication of that is you should have to ask yourself what is it that you're evaluating, because since there hasn't been any type of formative assessments, any type of process for the students to learn, it doesn't seem to make sense to have just the summative part. Similarly, one thing that we do a lot, and I'll say something about this later in the presentation. So one of the things that we do is we put a lot of emphasis on the grade. But however, for formative assessments, we think that what's important is that we keep track of a grade and that we assign the grade. But it's important also to keep in mind that the formative assessment is for students to learn. The most important aspect of it is learning, not just the grade in the grade book. Some of the teaching tools that we can use that I am currently using in my classrooms and that I will keep implementing more are ThinkLean and Canva. So when it comes to assigning formative assessments, you could use ThinkLean. ThinkLean is a website that allows you to create these nice tags, to create this nice sequence where you can show what you have learned, where the students can show what they have learned. And so basically one of the ways that you could use it is you have them read something, you have them read a book, an article, you can have them watch a video about your lesson, and then they can summarize the text. You could also ask them questions and have them answer the questions, and then they can add all of that information within this nice website. And it's a fun creative way. It's more interactive than just writing everything on a piece of paper or document, and so students can get access to this, and it's a more engaging way for them to also learn and to also save all the things that they learn in class. It's here, they can access it, and it's fun, it's interactive. Another online application that you can use is Canva. Canva basically is a website where you can create infographics, presentations, videos, and many other creative things. And basically, this is an example of an infographic that I created, and students can do the same. You can have students read an article book or watch a video about your lesson and summarize all the main points, also to summarize what they have learned and to answer any questions that you want them to answer about the text. And it's also a more visual way. You can have them express everything they've learned in a more visual way. And this could also be used as summative assessment, I would say, because you can ask them to make a presentation, to create a website, or to create multiple infographics where they show everything that they have learned in class. All right, our next point is grading. I'll say something about formative scores. In terms of what it looks like right now in our classrooms, one of the things that I've noticed is that we grade formative assessments with summative scores. That is not okay. What we should do instead is grade summative assessments with summative scores and grade formative assessments with formative scores. And hopefully this will make sense in a minute. Firstly, in general, there are three ways in which all types of assessments can be used. There are different types of assessments, and then there are three ways in which we can use them. We can use them to get formative scores, summative scores, or instructional feedback. So when it comes to formative and summative scores, every type of assessment can be used for formative or summative purposes. So there is also obtrusive assignments, unobtrusive assignments, and student-generated assignments. What that means is basically obtrusive assignments, the teacher is more involved, it's with the student and constantly interrupts the student and provides feedback. Unobtrusive assignment is an assignment that the student does completely on her own and without the student necessarily being aware that the teacher is observing her. The teacher could be observing her, but she's not aware that she is being assessed. And then there is student generated assessments. This basically means that the student creates the assessment. All of these assessments, these are type of assessments, we can use them for formative or summative purposes. And so every assessment type can be scored formatively or summatively. That's what I meant by when saying that every type of assessment can be used for formative purposes or summative purposes. This is one of the ideas too that I learned in class. This is from Marzano. A summative score should not be derived from a single final assessment, and that's important because basically what he believes that there are formative scores. As I mentioned before, formative assessments are viewed normally as the process of learning, and some educators argue that because it's the process, you can't really grade the process. What you should be grading is the summative assessment. You should be grading what happens at the end of the instruction, after the instruction. Marzano says, however, that we should grade both summative and formative assessments, and this is what most of you do here at the school. We grade both formative and summative assessments, and this is why I also mentioned before that we should also keep in mind that it's not the grade. The goal is not the grade for when it comes to formative assessments, but the goal is to generate a student learning, to have students learn. And so again, but Marzano says yes, it's okay. We should grade both summative and formative assessments. We can't just have summative assessment independently. There has to be some progression where we can see how the student got to the summative assessment, the summative score. So here's an example of a formative score. However, for Marzano, he would say that this is how we should do it. Suppose there are three types of assessments that you have, formative assessments that you have assigned to the students. The first one, the student gets a 7 out of 10, then he gets a 5 out of 10, and then he gets a 9 out of 10. Remember, you have clear learning goals. All of these assessments, there are different assessments. There's assessment 1, 2, and 3, but they all are assessing the student on the same learning goals. Because of that, every assessment should show that the student has achieved some level of learning in relation to the same learning goal. And it's because it's the same learning goal, technically Marzano says this 9 is reflective of the student's best performance. This is what it should count as the overall score. So the student gets a 9. You don't average out the scores for formative assessments, and this is what we do here at the school. We say this is a 7, this is a 5, this is a 9, and then we average that out into a 7, and we say my students got a 7 on the category of homework, for instance, which would be some form of formative assessment. Marzano says no. It should be, that's why you should have clear learning goals, 3 types of assessments that assess the same learning goal. If the student gets a 9, you should get a 9 for the overall score. When it comes to summative assessments, that's not the case. That's where we should average out the grades. So we have 3 summative assessments. They all, in principle, the idea, I think, is that they all have they all cover different types of learning goals, and so they should be averaged out, and that should give you you add up all the grades, dividing by the number of assessments that you have, and the student gets a 7 as the summative score. And so remember, the main difference is formative scores, you want to average those scores only if there's not progress or learning throughout all formative assessments. That will be if the student gets the same grade throughout all the formative assessments. Summative scores will most likely, you want to average those all the time. So again, our classroom, how does it look like? What we're doing is we are assigning, we are grading, we're giving summative scores to formative assessments. We are averaging out the grades for formative assessments. Instead, what Marzano would suggest is that we don't do that. Get rid of that average score, get clear learning goals, and have the student show what they have learned, and whatever score is the highest, that's what should count as the overall score. Another important point is grading and participation or behavior. Some questions that you could ask about this is why is it important? Why should we assess dispositions or behavior? Which is something that a lot of us, many of us, maybe all of us do here at the school. We all have some type of grade for behavior, and we put it in the grade book. In terms of what we should do is we should find formative ways of assessing behavior or dispositions. Now, and I'll say what I mean by that. So Stingen says that part of our job as teachers is to help students to develop productive behaviors and dispositions. What that means is it's our job. Yes, it should be assessed. We should have some type of way for keeping track of the student behavior, and it's our job to make sure that they improve their behavior, because it's important. We can't have students learn if their behavior is not good, if they don't have the right motivations or dispositions for learning. Oop, I'm sorry. Right. Um, our classrooms, what our classrooms look like. This is just like the main idea. What most of us are doing. We have a grade for tests, homework, projects, um, and then we have some type of grade for we call it participation, effort, behavior. The problem with this, Stingy says, is that it's not a good it's not an accurate reflection of the student's level of learning. Participation, effort, behavior, all of those, they don't really count. They don't say anything about the level of learning. They don't say anything about whether your student knows the math equations. It says something about the behavior, but it shouldn't be added up to the overall grade. And so instead of this, Stingy says that what we should do is we should have some type of tracking system that doesn't go into the grade, and to try to work with the parents and to come up with actions that we can take to help the student. And so to do that, you should have, the first thing that you should have, of course, you want to work on the habits or social skills that you want to keep track of. So make sure you have that clear. Define those actions, define what they are. And then you should assess and judge the level that you want to attain for each of those. And then you should also come up with some type of system that you can set up to track this information. Here's one example that I have created. There's some tracking system. It tracks the student's behavior. It's checking in and checking out a strategy, and the student keeps track of his behavior, and then the teacher assigns some points to say if the student's tracking of his behavior is accurate or not. And again, this is something that you can work with the parents, and you should work with them to make sure that the student is achieving the goals that you have set for improving the behavior or disposition. The next idea, and that's important, that we should all work on, is also feedback. I'll say what feedback is. What it looks like in our classrooms right now is that, well, I'm not sure really, but it's possible that sometimes we give advice to the students instead of feedback. So we're not giving them feedback, basically. What we should do, we should always have clear learning goals, because if we have clear learning goals, we can provide useful feedback. Wiggins defines feedback as useful information about the effects of an action in light of a goal. So it's useful. It's the data that we collect, again, from the assessments. If the assessment has clear learning goals, it's useful because we can collect useful data. And then it should be data about the effects of an action, meaning that it'll tell us what to do. It'll tell us it would tell the student what to do with the feedback, and they should all be connected to the learning goals. And so there are three things that we do when we look at assignments, when we look at the assessments, and try to give feedback to the students. Here are two examples. We sometimes we get feedback, sometimes we get we say nice things to the students, and sometimes we give advice. But again, it's not always feedback. So the first one that says nice job on the project, that's something that a lot of us say. We write this on the notes, we type this on the students' projects, and then that's the feedback, and then we give a grade for the project. But this doesn't count as feedback. The second example says, next time you'll want to make sure your thesis is clear to the reader. This one kind of looks like feedback, but Wiggins will also say that this doesn't count as feedback. The reason why these two are not feedback, again, if you go back to the definition, it should be useful information, and it should be connected to the learning goals. It should be something that we can use to take action, that the students can use to take action and to improve their performance of the learning goals. And so this doesn't tell the students what they should do. It's not clear. It's not connected to the learning goals. The first one is praise. The first one is saying something nice to the student. The second one, the example number 2, is advice. It counts as advice, but it doesn't tell the student what she should do in light of the learning goals. Here's what Wiggins says we should do. So this is the same two examples, but this time Wiggins includes it makes it better so that they actually accomplish the goal of giving feedback to the students. So you can read it. If you say nice job to the student, then you can say something else and say you answered the essential questions in great depth with lots of illustrative examples, and your oral presentation was polished and informative. So you're telling the student what he did in relation to the learning goals. So it's clear to the student that he did all of those components of the project, and that he did each of those right, each of those correctly. Same thing happens on the second example. There is something more about why the thesis is not clear. The teacher goes over each of the different aspects that makes a thesis clear, and goes over which one of those the student achieved and which one of those the student didn't achieve. One last thing about feedback is that even with we can give all the feedback to the students. We can go over each assignment and tell them through means of writing and communication, tell them what they need to do. But all of this feedback is less necessary if we also provide multiple examples to the students, multiple samples about what the assessment looks like, what a good assessment looks like. And so this is why it's also important that we, before we assess anything to the students, especially for summative assessments, that we first try to do it ourselves. We create the assessment, and then we create a sample. We pretend that we're the students, and we create a sample of the things that we're asking the students to do, so that we can show it to the students and show them how the final product looks, how an assessment looks like when it accomplishes all the learning goals that we want for the students. If we provide all of these models, Wiggins says, then the feedback is less necessary, because that piece of writing, in this case, or that project that we create for the students to show them in class, serves as feedback. They can access it, they can look at it. It's like it's almost like concrete feedback that they can look at and use to compare their own work, and so they don't necessarily need the teacher, or they need the teacher less for feedback. And this also brings us to our last point, flipping the classroom. Most of us use a traditional model for teaching, and one of the things that we can do is give it a try. Try flipping the classroom. Try flipping some of the aspects of the classroom, and see how it goes. It might work for you. And so basically the idea is that flipping the classroom, well, in a traditional model, the teacher gives a lesson like we do in class, and the students are all receiving the same lesson. It's supposed to fit all learning types, all the students. So it's the teacher just communicating everything, and the students have to somehow be attentive and get all the information right. Flip educators who promote flipping the classroom, they would say that this is not an ideal model, because it's not interactive. It's the teacher is talking, not all the students are listening, and the teacher doesn't get a chance to talk to each one of the students and actually make sure, for instance, that they are listening and learning. And so again, the traditional model is the teacher gives this lesson, and then the student gets homework about the lesson and does the homework at home. Flipping the classroom basically means that the student, so the teacher assigns the lectures, the teacher assigns the lessons through videos that the students can access at home, and then what that does is it facilitates learning in a way, because the teacher can then spend more time being a tutor, going around the classroom, helping each student, again, making sure that every student is doing work, and so we can focus on the more practical ways of the more practical aspects of teaching. And so again, going back to the example that I gave about feedback, this is also something that we could do if we create good examples of what we want the students to do in class. You create those, you add those to the lesson, add those to the videos that you want the students to watch at home, and then the students have a better understanding of what they need to do, and then you just focus on doing all the work, all the practical aspects of work, what you're actually assessing in the classroom. And so this is supposed to be a more interactive way of learning, because the student is directly interacting with the teacher, and the teacher has more time to spend with each of the students in the classroom. Some of the tools that you could use to do this, to flip your classroom, are quizzes. Quizzes.com is a website that I use a lot. You can use it to assign your video lessons at home, and you could even like add some basic multiple choice questions as the video goes on, so that the students can also practice what they're learning. And then you could also use Prezi.com. Prezi.com is basically a website where you can create these nice visuals, these nice presentations. They're very visual. The transitions especially are very nice. There's something about the transitions. It feels like it almost feels like three-dimensional. It's not, but it feels nice. It's visually appealing, and you can use this and create also book summaries about the articles or the main points that you want the students to learn. And so you assign those at home. You have them read those at home so they can then come back to the classroom and discuss that um, in group discussions. And one last resource that I would like to discuss that I almost forgot when it comes to student behavior or student participation and all of the yeah, terms that we use to refer to that. One thing that I do is I also use this website, the Wheel of Names. It's basically a wheel. You spin it. It has all the names of your students. These are not my students. These are just randomly generated students. But you can use that, and you spin the wheel, name, then a name pops up, and then whatever name that is, that's the student who has to participate. This makes it less awkward, and it makes it more fun because the students don't feel like you're picking on them in class. And so it makes every student to actually participate, because then you remove the name and then it has to be a new student every time you spin the wheel. So this is it. This was my presentation. I hope it was helpful,